In 2009, McKinsey & Company estimated the economic cost of the achievement gap for low-income kids in the U.S. at $700 billion to $1.3 trillion per year in lost gross domestic product. They call it the equivalent of a permanent national recession. We spend billions each year on drugs to help kids focus and learn. Meanwhile, the dropout rate in our 50 largest cities is nearly 50%. We're getting a horrible return on our investment. If we could find a drug-free way to close that achievement gap and send more than 90% of high-need kids to college, it would be a big deal. Well, it turns out we can. Here's my story. A posse of LA gang members walked through a farmer's market. Shaved heads, teardrop tattoos, oversized clothing. They stopped in front of a tiny kid playing Brahms on a tiny violin. After 5 or 6 minutes, without saying a word to one another, I watched those gang members pull out their own money and lay it gently in the child's case. I was at UCLA at the time, completing a doctorate in public health focused on what it takes to make a healthy community. Those gang members were teaching me that they would rather be doing what that child was doing than what they were doing, but they never had the chance. The child in the farmer's market that day was my 5.5-year-old youngest son. I went from high alert when those gang members got right in his face to tears. For me, it was an authentic moment of grace. I looked at that incident as an academic, as a public health professional. Could music change the lives of low-income kids? Could teaching kids to make music make our schools and communities safer? But I looked at that incident through another lens. I looked at that incident as the mom of the tiny kid in the farmer's market that day. I knew everything that went into providing the support that enabled a child to learn to play well. But there was another lens I looked through as well. See, my first child was born when I was 17. I'm a domestic violence survivor. I was homeless with 2 kids for a year in my 20s in Los Angeles. I enrolled at LA City College as a freshman at the age of 33, and nearly 10 years later, I was completing a doctorate in public health at UCLA. Look, here's the thing. We were spending more money on my youngest son's music lessons each year than I had lived on with 2 kids not that many years before. Does it make sense? Should music lessons be only for kids whose parents have money? I knew what my son's lessons cost and his instrument, and I knew too that it wasn't likely that those gang members and anyone connected with them would ever have the opportunity to learn to play music well or to have the support that would enable them to do so. And at the same time, I knew as completely as I'd ever known anything that that was wrong. I knew I had to do something about it. At least I had to try. I dug into the literature. Music learning was linked to improvements in math, language, cognition, brain development, and behavior. I wanted to figure out how to capture those benefits for low-income kids. We launched Harmony Project in 2001 with 36 kids from low-income homes. The idea was to mentor high-need kids through music lessons for their entire childhood and to build bands and orchestras with them in their own neighborhoods after school hours. So what happened? Today, throughout LA's highest crime gang zones, 2,000 kids ages 5 to 18 are spending 5 to 10 hours per week together learning how to make music with one another instead of getting into trouble. More than 500 students fill our waiting lists. School enrollment is required, and as our students advance, we train them to mentor their less advanced peers. Affiliated programs have launched in 8 regions across 7 states. See, a youth orchestra or band is a perfect metaphor for community. They only work if the members show up at rehearsals, if they come prepared, if they learn when to solo or improvise and when to blend in, and if they can work effectively across cultural and ethnic divides. The personal impact of music training is just as profound. Jamila grew up in South Los Angeles, an only child. She discovered Harmony Project, rode a bus more than an hour to get to lessons each week, multiple days a week, graduated from high school, entered Dartmouth on a full scholarship, earned a bachelor's degree in geography and a minor in Mandarin. Today, Jamila is teaching English in Beijing. She'll enter law school next fall, fully fluent in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. Since 2008, more than 93% of our high school seniors have graduated in 4 years and have gone on to colleges like Dartmouth, Tulane, NYU, USC, UC Berkeley, and dozens more, despite dropout rates of 50% or more in the neighborhoods where they live. We've had 2 Fulbright scholars, and we're only 14 years old. Those high school graduates have been with us an average of 6.5 years, average. Our students live in neighborhoods that have been ravaged by substance abuse and violence. In 2007, the Los Angeles Almanac reported that there are 1,300 different gangs in Los Angeles County and at least 150,000 gang members. The website for the Los Angeles Police Department reports that gang membership has increased over the last 5 years. We have students who have witnessed the death of a family member or a friend due to substance abuse or violence, whose parents won't let them play outside because it's just not safe. Gang recruitment typically begins in elementary school. Students can be hurt or killed for not joining a gang. Students have told us they made a considered decision to leave their gang affiliation to focus on music, even students with multi-generation gang families. It can be dangerous for kids to leave a gang. They can face retaliation, but music is considered neutral and it's well accepted. Music-based mentoring gives kids a positive new group and a path out of gang culture. Our students call Harmony Project their second family, their sanctuary, or their refuge. One of our teens told a group of visitors that Harmony Project is where you go to get rid of all the stress in your life. In after-school band and orchestra rehearsals, children and teens spend 3 hours together each week, listening carefully to one another and practicing agreeing. Musicians don't agree, it doesn't sound good, right? Kids who spend that much time learning to play music together become hardwired at finding ways to agree rather than promoting conflict. I promise you, if members of Congress had grown up making music together, our federal government would function a lot better, no question. Kids forge deep connections with one another over time as they learn to play increasingly challenging music with one another. The other students in their band or orchestra classes and sections become their personal support group and some of their best friends. Our shy kids learn to find their voice. Learning to play music together in bands and orchestras and to perform in front of people on a regular basis in frequent recitals helps kids develop confidence, their social skills, and it helps them to become articulate. This is a big deal because if a kid can't speak up, she can't ask questions. She can't get help when she needs it. And she's not likely to report abuse. Nancy was born deaf. Her hearing was surgically restored when she was 8 years of age. She had to be taught to speak, but the process was awkward, and Nancy became so shy that if she was at a fast food place with her family and they asked her to go get some napkins, she would just not move. Nancy was an 11-year-old special ed student when her little brother Raul began violin lessons at the age of 8. Unbeknownst to us, Nancy attended Raul's lessons and practiced every day on Raul's really small violin. Eventually, her father told us what was going on, and we enrolled Nancy as well. That spring, Nancy performed a solo piece on violin in a recital. It was the first time in her life she had ever stood up in front of a group of people to do anything. That was also the end of special ed classes for Nancy. She was mainstreamed the following fall, and she thrived, and she soon became known as a real talker. Nancy studied violin with us for 7 years, graduated in the top 10% of her class, and is currently attending college. It's tough enough to grow up in today's world. It's a lot more challenging if you live in a low-income family in a high-crime neighborhood. Consistent connection with a caring adult professional is life-changing. The research is very clear about this. When it comes to kids, there are no shortcuts. So our students were transforming in front of our eyes, socially, emotionally, and academic. Kids whose parents had received little education themselves were graduating from high school and attending fine colleges with majors from genetics and engineering to economics, pre-med, and pre-law. They were really blowing our minds. What we saw, the transformation that we saw, was way more than our social science could explain. So eventually, I got in touch with Dr. Nina Kraus at Northwestern University's Auditory Neuroscience Lab. Could intensive music training be positively affecting our students' brains? A team from the Kraus Lab came to Los Angeles to conduct a series of tests on 2nd to 4th graders who had applied to participate in Harmony Project. They found that 2 years of music training improved our students' neural responses to sound, which is a brain measure that's linked to literacy. Positive results were seen with 2 years at 5 hours a week, but not with 1 year. So while positive results were seen, they don't happen quickly. But the cool news is that once they happen, they last. If your brain has trouble recognizing consonants, your language and reading ability will certainly lag. The red here shows the ability of kids' brains to tell one consonant from another, like the difference between b and g. Over 2 years, the brains of Harmony Project students became significantly and automatically more accurate identifying the sounds of consonants. This is automatic. The brains of the waitlisted controls showed no improvement over the same period of time. Students who performed more hours, who participated more hours per week, showed the greatest improvement in brain function. So there's definitely a dose response. But what about reading? Between 2nd and 3rd grade, reading scores of non-participant controls declined, while reading scores of music students held steady at grade level. This is a big deal because reading at grade level by 3rd grade is a major predictor of future success in school. The reason for that is in 1st and 2nd grade, kids are learning to read. But from 3rd grade on, they're reading to learn. Kids who aren't reading at grade level by 3rd grade fall behind, and it becomes increasingly difficult for them to ever catch up. In previous research, the Kraus Lab identified a neurologic profile of poverty in children. Poverty negatively influences neural encoding, which results in less efficient, less consistent, and noisier processing of sound. In our music students, the Kraus team found real improvement in brain function that helps offset the negative impact of poverty. So here was part of our answer to why our students were doing so phenomenally well from the highest crime gang zones in Los Angeles, where dropout rates are 50% or more. The bottom line is that kids' brains are plastic, but it takes years of work on the part of each student to effectively tune up her own brain. It doesn't happen quickly. Apparently, extensive music training, the way we do it over multiple years, enables them to do just that. They tune up their own brain. They automatically then become much better learners without any effort. It's just they're quicker and they get everything a lot faster. You can read the research yourself. Hard biological data that links improved academic outcomes for high-need kids is new to the field of education. That's just the last couple of years. What does this data point to? Music, a frequent target of school budget cuts. And we keep talking about how are we going to close the achievement gap. Well, we're doing it. I'd like to engage in a little thought experiment with you right now. Imagine right now if your own cognitive function was reduced by 6, 8, 10, 12%. Imagine the difference that it would have made in your school career, in your work career, in your relationships. There isn't a part of your life that wouldn't have been affected. And these are the kinds of things that intensive music training of high-need kids transforms. Neurological findings are only part of the story. Mentoring works best in a context of a specific activity. Mentoring low-income kids through music for their entire childhood and connecting their families to supportive services as needed gives us a holistic approach to eliminating poverty. I'm tired of hearing low-income kids described as problems. They're not problems. They're precious resources. But we know two things now that we haven't known before. One, poverty negatively affects a child's developing brain and her ability to learn. And two, we know that intensive music training over multiple years can help offset the negative impact of poverty and make kids automatically much better learners. Improved brain function, student engagement and achievement, stress reduction, responsibility, grit, and a safe, supportive community. Add to this successful participation in challenging college programs. We're successfully turning around thousands of kids' lives in LA's gang zones by mentoring them through music. If it works here, if it can turn kids' lives around here, it will work anywhere. Imagine if inner city kids throughout the country were spending 5 to 10 hours per week learning to make music together. Imagine how joyful and how much safer our schools and communities would become. When we turn on the news at night, we'd see a completely different world. Thank you.